start. Video number 1, collage basics. And I am so excited because we're gonna make a basic collage like this. This is the end of the video, what it looks like. And this is phase 1. So after this video, I'm gonna show you how to embellish on top of this. But to start, you're gonna need a big canvas, a blank canvas. It can be small, but it's nice to work large if you can. If you don't have canvas, it's okay. If you're just at home and you want to try something, just grab a piece of cardboard, maybe a cardboard box. It takes glue, it takes paper, it's fine, it's practice. If you have scrap papers like me everywhere, magazines, that's what I like to use in my background. Just really fun, kind of neutral pages. Also, I use book pages, magazine pages, wrapping paper, tissue paper, whatever. You're gonna need a big brush, a nice wide brush to put your paper down, a pair of scissors, and my very favorite product, Liquitex Matte Medium. This stuff is the glue that literally holds it all together for me. You can find this in your local craft store or online. It is really nice and thin. This is matte. They also make it in gloss. And yeah, this is the best stuff. Now, if you don't have this or you don't have access to it, you can also use Mod Podge, or you can just use Elmer's glue. I would suggest you water the Elmer's glue down a little bit so it's easier to work with. Okay, so that's it. I'm gonna get started. I'm gonna flip the camera over and we're gonna start our collage. Let's go. All right, guys, here we go. So we have our canvas right here. This is about 20 by 20 canvas. Please feel free to pick any size you want, whatever you feel comfortable with. Remember, the bigger you go, the bigger your image probably needs to be to go on top. So I like to consider how big my focal point portrait is, and I like it to be fairly big, but enough room around it so I can add doodads like flowers and stars and decorate. That's what you want to consider when you start. But let's just start with the background first. Like I said, I'm going to use different magazine sheets. I love fashion magazines. I want to pick out neutral things that won't interfere too much with the foreground. So lots of words, but nothing too severe. Just to start with a neutral background. Now, as you get braver and as you start doing more of these, you might want to experiment with bigger graphics in the background. But just for the sake of this instructional video, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it neutral. Old magazines, old literature, old book pages, they have different types of yellowing. The yellow is because the paper has been exposed to light, and it has acidic paper, so it does yellow over time. When we put down our medium and cover this, this is matte medium, Liquitex. You can also use Mod Podge if you want to use, but the reason I like to use this is because it is a little easier to work with. It's not as sticky as Mod Podge, and it is a protector against UV rays on your finished artwork. So if you are using vintage paper, please use a quality glue or medium to seal it in and protect it for over the long haul. They make it, this is matte. I like to start with matte, and if I want to add gloss to certain areas, I will for texture and effect. But you're really, it's up to you. It's a personal preference. So just know that they do make it in matte. They make it in gloss. This is a thinner solution. They also make heavy body, which means it's really thick, and you can also thin the thicker ones down. But I like working with a thinned out solution because it's just easier to work with. Okay, let's get started. So this is the pages I'm going to use. I'm going to actually make them smaller, smaller strips, because it just makes it easier to work with. So I just tear them down the middle. I'm going to take my matte medium and put it into a cup. Okay, and I like to talk about my layering process here. I like to compare it to like making lasagna. So you want to put down a layer of sauce, put down your noodle, and then put down sauce again. It's just like a keep things wet kind of thing. So you get your wide brush, okay, and you start with a thin sweeping layer. You don't want it too goopy. You don't want it too thick. You don't want it too thin either. You want to make sure you put enough down that it's all covered. And I work in sections from left to right. I don't know why. That's just the way I work. You don't have to. You can start down here if you want, but let's just start up in this corner because that's what I'm used to. And I start with my first piece and I just put it down into the corner like that. Okay. I'm going to just put down more layers. Again, just you can overlap them a little bit if you want. You're just building it up. Use the same glue from your brush to go back over and smooth it all out. All right. I'm just going to quickly go over the bottom. All this down. These are really nice thin sheets of paper, so they're pretty easy to layer on top of each other. The one thing you don't want to use is like thick pieces of decorative craft paper that are going to resist the glue and kind of like, you know, you see this little, even where it overlaps here, you've kind of got some wrinkling and some, you know, texture. I don't mind this small piece of texture, but like if it were a bulky piece of decorative cardstock, it might interfere with your subject that's going on top. Now remember, if you're putting down a portrait, say I'm putting this down, whatever you have underneath could possibly show through. Once this is wet and it starts to stick to the paper, you're going to see things underneath. So if you don't want, like say this was up here near where the face is going to be, then she'll have this black square underneath her eye, and that's very distracting, and we don't want that. One thing to do is just to avoid this area with paper, or at least keep the paper neutral like I've done. So I don't mind some things showing through, but I don't want large odd shapes to like bleed through onto her face. So the other thing you could do to kind of like counter effect that is to, after it's dry, maybe add a little white paint, white out the area so you don't get that bleed through. Okay, so let's say we put down paper and then we have some major wrinkling going on. That's where our squeegee tool, I don't know the exact proper word for this, but it's my squeegee like spatula smoother tool. This is Catalyst is the name of this brand. I purchased it at a fine art store and really only like places like Blick or places that really have serious art supplies carry this, or you could probably order them online. But if you don't have this, or you can't find one, just use a credit card. That also works. The spatula is nice and soft though, so it doesn't tear your paper. This is going to come in mostly handy when you put your portrait down, because it's going to get any wrinkles out of the face or in the areas that are really important. Another really cool thing to add if you want to touch a color is tissue paper. I save tissue paper from gifts and things like that. Put it in I have a tissue paper bin here in the studio. So, and it's cool because tissue paper just needs just a little bit of glue and it clings down to the art very quickly. I'm also going to take my medium and just squirt it on like that. No big deal. And smooth it out. Lay the tissue paper down. And it's great because you can see through it. It creates like a beautiful layer, like watercolor. And yeah, it just adds a nice little splash of color without being too much. very easy to smooth down. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to cut her out. I'm going to take out all the negative space and try to line her up in the center and build up the rest of her body. I have printed her out in pieces like this, and I'm going to fit it together like a puzzle because I didn't have a large format of her printed out. I don't have a large format printer in my studio, just a regular 8x10. So you can print them out in sections. You cut, crop and paste, and piece it together on your canvas. Now notice when I'm cutting, I'm leaving a little bit of space around her face because I like for that contrast of her to look like she stands out a little bit more. It's just a personal preference. You may choose not to do that, but I do like the way it looks. And I cut around the best that I can. I don't make a perfect cut. It's not a perfect photograph. It's not really clear, so kind of forces me to make guesses, which turn out to be really cool. Okay, so I'm going to put down a little bit more of my medium, smooth it out with my flat brush, and then line her up here into the center. I want to make sure I leave enough space around her head if I want to add decorative elements, and also leave space below. I'm just going to move her up just a little bit to put the rest of her body in. And again, smooth it down with your brush. And now you're going to see, because you have layers underneath, you're going to see some buckling and wrinkling. You might see that little piece right there. It's okay. It's not a complete deal breaker. I don't mind for a little bit of texture. But if you want to get rid of those, that's where your spatula tool or your credit card is going to come in handy, just to kind of take and drag out towards the edge. So you take all those little bubbles and you pull them out gently. You don't want to scrape too hard because you'll tear your paper. And you'll also pick up some of the ink from the image below. This is muck glue, so I like to keep a little paper towel nearby to wipe it down and keep my spatula clean. As you can see, I tore a little bit of my tissue paper, but that's okay. I have a little bit here left over. I mean, normally I probably just leave it because I'm going to put other stuff and embellish on top of this, but if it bothers you, you can always just put a little scrap down and smooth it right in. No big deal. And keep going. Okay, and I'm going to put in the rest of her body. This is where the puzzle piece process comes in if you have printed your portrait out in sections. So get the back wet and just line it up. I had to cut off the extras that I didn't need. And it doesn't even have to be perfect. If you want to put it off a little off center, it kind of creates a little interest. But if you need it to be spot on, you just want to find something in the photograph that matches and just register it like that and smooth it out. I got mine a little crooked, but I am not a perfectionist, so that is fine with me. And I even left some of the margin around the edge, you know, no big deal. Okay, so I cut around the background, and now I know I don't need this part because it's already here. I do need this side of her arm on her body. So I'm just gonna cut like that and try to visually line it up and lay it down. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but if you need it to be perfect, just find where you left off and line it up in there. I'm off center because I laid this piece off center, so I'm just gonna kind of like riff it a bit. And there you go. Mine's not perfect. Again, that is totally cool with me. In fact, I think it makes it a little more interesting. This is where you want to take your spatula or your credit card and smooth out any of the wrinkles that you might have. You're not going to get them all out. It's just the nature of working in this type of medium. But you do want to make sure, I think the worst part is when you have a wrinkle across the face or somewhere where it's really distracting. Also remember when I said you could see some of the things behind the face like seep through the paper. You could see the polka dots a little bit. I actually like that. And some of the blue from the tissue paper is kind of creating that cool color effect over her face. Another reason I like to work in black and white, because cool, interesting things like that can happen. You just never know. All right, so now I've got my portrait on, and it's time to add other elements of interest. You can collage paper onto her shoulders or into the hair, some flowers to kind of build up a fantasy. I call it my fashion fantasy. I might put a jacket on her, find something kind of cool. You know, I could scour through magazines and find some interesting stuff. So I'm going to do that right now, and then we're going to meet back here and we're going to fine tune this portrait just a little bit. Okay, so now I need to add into the rest of her body, and I found like this really pretty blouse, and I downloaded it and printed it out in halves so it will fit. I'm going to cut it out and place it down. And now here's the trick. So I cut it out and I still have the margin around the edge, but if I want it to look like it's on her. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the neck out a little bit. That looks a little more realistic, maybe down a little bit. And I'll do this to the other side as well. I should also mention that I let some of these layers dry before I added yet another layer on top, because this is about 2 layers of paper. If you keep adding and adding while it's wet, you can get more buckling. I mean, you can do it, but it's gonna the paper is gonna resist all those layers. So let it dry for about 30-45 minutes. I mean, it's gonna be a little bit sticky, but it's better than adding gobs and gobs of glue on top of it of itself. Okay, so I put the blouse down and I just wanted to scoot this up a little bit so you can see I have overhang. Now I can cut that off, or like most of the time what I do is I just leave it until the whole thing is done, and then I can go with an X-Acto and cut it, or I can put glue on the bottom piece of it and wrap it around the edge of the canvas like that. Use your fingers to really kind of like work it in to the edge. And it's nice when it wraps around because it really kind of like looks like, you've really paid attention to all the details. Okay, so what I just did was I added a piece of wallpaper that I cut out from this sample roll that I had. I cut out some flowers to add to her hat that I created. And it's thicker paper, so you want to use it on top of all your other layers, because if you try to use it underneath, again, you're going to have buckling and all kinds of crazy stuff happen. So I'm just going to work with that wallpaper. It's wanting to curl a little bit there, but I'm going to keep working on it and smoothing it out with my spatula. And it's looking pretty good. I'm just going to keep adding things, elements from magazines and found papers, and again, keeping her the focus. I don't want to cover up too much of her face, but I want to create a whole nother type of character than what I started out with her. That's just my style. Everybody has their own style. Everybody has their own way of, creating. So, this part, I'm going to stop the video and start adding more decorative elements, more thicker papers, and then we'll pick up from there.